welcome to our today's session where we are discussing the capital allowances. In this session, we are specifically going to continue with the discussion of the industrial building allowance. Remember, in our previous session, we have already discussed the type of capital allowance, which we called the wear and tear allowance. So in this continuation, we are discussing industrial building allowance. Now, industrial building allowance is granted to any person who incurs capital expenditure on construction or purchase of an industrial building to be used by him or his lessee for the purpose of operating a business. For the purpose of operating a business. So this is the construction or purchase of an industrial building. In our subsequent discussion, we are going to define what is an industrial building or what constitutes an industrial building. Now, IBD is granted on a straight line basis, unlike the wear and tear allowance. That is equal amounts each year. Equal amounts each year. Now, what are the applicable rates for granting this allowance, the industrial building allowance? Now, for normal manufacturing buildings, IBA is granted at the rates of 2.5 was 10% from January 2010, and previously it was 2.5%. That was up to 2009. So for normal manufacturing buildings, it is 10%, that is the rate, and previously and up to 2009, it was 2.5%. Then for hotel buildings certified by the commissioner to be an industrial building, IBA is granted at the rate of 10%. That is from January 2007. And previously, it was 4% per annum, 4% per annum. Then we have the hostels and educational buildings. Hostels and educational buildings, IBA is granted at the rate of 50%. That is from 1st January 2010. And previously, it was 10%. Previously, it was 10%. Now, in this particular case, we can see what is happening is there is a very big increment of the rate from 10% to 50%. A very big increment for this allowance. Now, this big increment is, of course, to encourage the construction of the hostels and educational buildings to offer accommodations. Specifically here, it could be to solve the problem of accommodation and also to boost the growth of the education sector, whereby there are so many students looking for hostels or accommodation, and the training institutions are not able to offer accommodation. So it's an encouragement for other investors to invest in hostels and educational buildings to accommodate the many students in the urban centers and other places. So that is why the rate was enormously increased from 10% to 50%. Then, for rental residential buildings, the rental residential buildings constructed in approved development areas. Constructed in approved development areas for low-income earners, IBA is granted at the rate of 5% per annum. 5% per annum on the qualifying costs. So this must be in approved development areas, and again for low-income earners. Now, approved means it must have been approved by the commissioner in charge. And also now, the low-income earners are the people who are earning less than $35,000 per month for the purpose of this definition. So for the purpose of this definition, low-income earners are people earning less than $35,000 per month. So we are saying now the rental residential buildings constructed in such areas also will qualify for IBA at the rate of 5% per annum. Now, for qualifying commercial buildings, that is a shop, a fish, and a showroom, the rate of IBA is at 25% per annum, again on the qualifying costs. Note, here it's important to note that these rates can be changed. Can be changed depending on what? If a person considers the above rates to be inadequate for one reason or the other, he can apply to the Commissioner of Domestic Taxes for enhanced or higher rates. For enhanced or higher rates. For instance, where you are talking about a certified hotel building, if the owner of the hotel building realizes that his hotel cannot live for a period of 25 years, then he can ask for, not a period of 10 years. Then he can ask for an enhanced rate of the industrial building allowance. Now, how am I getting the 10 years? 10 years is, remember we have said we are granting 10% per annum. 10% per annum. Therefore, it means since this is on a straight line basis, it is assumed that a hotel building will have a good working life of 10 years. Will have a good working life of 10 years. Basically, 100% divided by 10. Then, if one realizes that their building cannot last, it does not have an economic useful life of 10 years, then they can on that basis ask for an enhanced rate of the industrial building allowance. Now, there are some points that one needs to understand so that we can be able to know how the industrial building allowance is computed and granted. Number one, where an industrial building is used for a period of less than 12 months, IBD is apportioned accordingly. That is very important, that IBD is apportioned where the building is used for a period of less than 12 months. E.g., if it is 6 months, then we will take the annual IBD and then we shall multiply by 6 out of 12. The second thing to note is if an industrial building is acquired from a builder or contractor, the qualifying cost for IBD to the new owner is the actual purchase price. This is if an industrial building is acquired from a builder or contractor, the qualifying cost for IBD to the new owner is the actual purchase price. Actual purchase price. For instance, if A Limited buys a building from Mujengo Contractors at 40 million, the qualifying cost for IBD will be 40 million because they have bought it from a contractor or a builder, a person who constructs for the purpose of selling. 3, if an industrial building is acquired before use, if it is acquired before use from a person who is not a builder for purpose of selling, the qualifying cost is not the qualifying cost is the lower of the cost and the purchase costs and the purchase price. The qualifying cost is the lower of the purchase price and the cost. So we would take the lower of the two to be able to determine the qualifying cost where the building is acquired from a person other than a contractor or a person who builds for the purpose of building. For instance, if A Limited bought a building from C, who is not a contractor for the purpose of selling, and C and constructed it for 20 million, and A buys it for 25 million, then the qualifying cost for the purpose of IBA is the lower of the 25 million and the 20 million. In this case, the 20 million. So where the building is acquired from a person other than a person who constructs for the purpose of selling, the qualifying cost is the lower of the purchase price and the original cost to the builder of that building. Then 4, if an industrial building is sold more than once, it changes hands more than once before use, the qualifying cost to the new owner is the last purchase price. So this building is changing hands before it is first used. So it moves from A, it goes to B, B does not use it, it goes to C, C does not use it, it goes to D, and D now uses the building. Then the qualifying cost for purpose of the IBA is the purchase price. Then 5, if an industrial building is acquired after use for some time, the qualifying cost for IBD to the new owner is the same. Is the same qualifying cost for IBA to the previous owner. Is the same qualifying cost of IBA to the previous owner. In other words, the new owner inherits the residue of IBA of the previous owner. So if the industrial building has been given IBA at any one time, then it changes hands after that, or it is sold. The qualifying cost for IBA to the second person is the same as the qualifying cost of the person who used it the first time. So the second person inherits from the previous owner. So in other words, the new owner inherits the residue left by the previous owner. His purchase price will be ignored. His purchase price will be ignored. Then, number 6, with effect from 1st January 1997, if an industrial building qualifies for ID, and it also qualifies for IBD, the qualifying cost for IBD is the original cost net of investment deduction. Investment deduction is, we are going to consider the investment deduction in our subsequent discussion. But the investment deduction, the ID is the investment deduction. So here we should note that if a building qualifies for IBD, that is IBA, sorry, and IBA, and also qualifies for ID, then the qualifying cost for IBA is the original cost net of ID. For the purpose of this discussion, the IBA, that is the industrial building allowance, and the industrial building deduction should be understood to mean the same. Industrial building allowance and industrial building deduction. The other important thing to note here is the cost of land together with all related incidental costs do not qualify for IBA. The cost of land together with any related incidental cost do not qualify for IBA, such as the stamp duty and the legal fees of acquiring the land. Then, the other important part to understand is that the cost of the offices, the retail shops, and the showrooms, and the dwelling houses will not qualify for the IBA unless their total costs, I will repeat that. I want to repeat that. I already been given the shop, office, and showroom. I think that I'll leave that note. I don't know utaitoaje. Yeah, mwisho. You remove it, eh? Okay. The one I was giving as number 8. Okay. That I can go to the definition. Okay. The definition of the industrial building. Now, having said that, those notes, then I'll go into giving the definition of an industrial building. The definition of an industrial building. We want to understand what an industrial building means. Now, an industrial building means a building used for the following purposes. A building used for the following purposes. 1, small industries, used by small industries such as the posher mills, the soap factories, the sawmills. 2 is large manufacturing industries. Large manufacturing industries such as Coca-Cola, Unilever, Bidcom, Mears, Sugar, etc. So the building used by those large manufacturing industries. 3, building used by ranch agricultural contractors. Buildings used by ranch agricultural contractors, e.g. for plowing, weeding, pruning, harvesting, threshing, but it does not include buildings used by farmers. It does not include buildings used by farmers. 4 is buildings used for commercial undertakings of transportation business, such as inland navigation, tunnel, bridge, dock, water, and electricity supply network. So they are also part of the industrial buildings. Remember, we are giving a broad definition of an industrial building by saying what it includes. Then 5 is buildings used for storage of goods arriving by air or sea, raw materials, partly manufactured goods and finished goods, such as stores, warehouse, godowns, silos, etc. So buildings used for purpose of storage. So that is basically the first definition of an industrial building. What an industrial building includes. The definition extends, and it also includes a hotel building certified to be an industrial building. It includes a hotel building certified to be an industrial building. And that's why we have here certified hotel buildings as part of industrial building. Then it also includes prescribed dwelling houses. Prescribed dwelling houses used. Prescribed dwelling houses or labor quarters for workers. That is also part of an industrial building. It also includes a hostel building. A hostel building, that's why we have a hostel building here, and educational buildings certified to be an industrial building. Certified to be an industrial building. It also extends to rental residential buildings. So that's why we have here rental residential buildings in planned development areas. In planned development areas, and also includes commercial buildings and infrastructure approved by the commissioner to be industrial building. So the definition of an industrial building is by inclusion. What should we include? So it is not only the building for the purpose of manufacture. We are extending it to other buildings, certified hotel buildings, educational and institutional buildings, hostels, rental residential houses. So we don't have to limit our definition to only the buildings used for the purpose of manufacture. It is a broad definition which is by inclusion. What should we include as industrial building? It also extends to buildings used for the welfare of workers. Buildings used for the welfare of workers also forms part of the industrial buildings. Now, which are these buildings? We have a canteen, social halls, sports pavilions, gyms, clinics and dispensaries, swimming pools. Swimming pools. We have staff clubs. We have steam baths. We have saunas. We have jacuzzi, etc. All those buildings used for the welfare of workers also are part of our industrial building, our broad definition of what is an industrial buildings. Then it extends to substantial renovations of an industrial buildings. So if we have substantial renovations of an industrial building, any of these buildings that we have mentioned up here, then those substantial renovations will qualify as part of industrial building, but excluding routine maintenance and repair. So any routine maintenance and repair of the industrial building from our definition will not be part of the industrial building. So that is important. Now, a few points to note. That from 1st January 1995, the following civil works and related structures constitutes part of an industrial building, provided that they relate or contribute to the use of these buildings. Provided they constitute or relate to the use of these buildings. The first of them is parking areas. Parking areas and roads, including the loading bay, also forms part of the industrial building. We also have railway lines and related structures. So long as they are serving this industrial building, they will be part of the industrial building. Railway lines and related structures. Water and industrial, effluent and sewerage works. Water, industrial effluent and sewerage works will also form part of the industrial buildings. This includes things like the borehole, stone water tanks, the borehole, the stone water tanks, the drainage systems, and sewerage system. They will be part of the industrial building. Then we have communication and electrical posts will also form part of the industrial building. Communication and electrical posts. Then we have perimeter walls and fences. Specifically here, the stone perimeter walls and fences will also be part of this industrial building for the purpose of this definition. Now, having known what now constitutes the industrial building, or what should be defined as industrial building, and the rates of giving the industrial building allowance, then we need to know the structure or the general format of computing the industrial building allowance. There is a general layout which is normally used for computing the industrial building allowance. And the general layout is, first, we get the nature of the asset. In this case, the nature of the building. Specifically here, the nature of the asset stroke building. So here, the asset in this case is the building. Now, what we need to know about these buildings are the following. We need to know the residue brought forward. We need to know the qualifying costs for IBA. Then we need the IBA itself. So if I just take one of the rates there, like for the normal manufacturing business, we would indicate the rate of giving it as 10%. And then we would have the residue carried forward. Now, what are these things? The residue brought forward. Now, let me begin with the qualifying costs. The qualifying cost is the purchase price, or the cost incurred to construct the industrial building. Qualifying cost is the purchase cost, or the cost incurred in the construction of the building. That's the meaning of the qualifying cost. The residue brought forward. Now, if the building is being used for the first time, then the residue brought forward is nil, because it has not been in use the previous year. Then we would give the IBA on the qualifying cost at the rate of 10%. Then we would get the residue carried forward. Now, for a building that has not been in use before, the residue to be carried forward is the difference between the qualifying costs and the IBA, meaning B minus C. In this case, it will be B minus C. If a building has been in use now for more than 1 year, then it means that in the first year, we had a residue to carry forward, which was the difference between qualifying cost and IBA. That was B minus C. Now, in the subsequent year, then we shall have a residue brought forward. So the one which we are carrying forward is the one which is going to be brought forward in the subsequent year. And in this case, then, we would subtract A minus C to get the residue to be carried forward, So if I just take one of the buildings that qualifies for the IBD and use some figures at random and just pick like a staff canteen. So let's take the building we are talking about is the staff canteen. And it is the first time it is being used. Then it has no residue. If it was constructed at 1 million, and it was there at the beginning of the year, that means it is being used for a full year, then we would give 10% of 1 million, and we would have 100,000 as the IBA. Then the residue will be B minus C, in this case, 900,000. That will be the residue to be carried forward. And this is in the first year of use. Now, in the second year of use, we shall give the same canteen IBA. Remember, we said that it is granted on a reducing, not on a reducing, on a straight line basis. It is granted on a straight line basis. So the same canteen will enjoy the allowance in the following year. So we would continue in the following year with the same staff canteen. The residue in this second year will be the residue that was carried forward from the previous year. The qualifying cost remains the same.